folded hands. Heavenly Father, I pray for everyone watching this video right now. May you bless them with peace, joy, and breakthroughs in their lives. Amen. Sparkles, hello, my wonderful family. I am so glad and grateful to have you here with me today. Your support means the world, and I truly don't take it for granted. Speech balloon, before we dive into today's powerful story, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and of course, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update from this channel. The divorce papers are already drawn up, Elena Blackwood whispered into her phone, her manicured fingers trembling as she stared at the wall of photographers gathered outside their estate's iron gates. All I need is your signature, Vincent. The silence on the other end stretched so long she wondered if the call had dropped. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their home office, she watched another news van pull up to join the growing media circus. Their 15-year marriage was about to become tomorrow's headline, and she wasn't sure which hurt more, the betrayal that had brought them to this moment, or the fact that she felt nothing but emptiness where love used to live. Elena. Vincent's voice finally came through, rough with exhaustion. We need to talk before you. There's nothing left to say. She cut him off, the same way she'd been cutting him off for months. Maybe years. When had they stopped really listening to each other? The whole world knows what you did. What we both did. Our marriage has been a performance for so long. I can't remember when we stopped being real. Welcome to a story about love that seemed lost, and the painful journey back to each other that no amount of money could buy. Elena ended the call and set her phone face down on the mahogany desk that had cost more than most people's cars. Everything in their lives carried a price tag that should have meant security, success, happiness. Instead, their wealth had become a gilded cage, trapping them in roles they'd outgrown without either of them noticing until it was almost too late. The irony wasn't lost on her that Vincent Sterling, the tech mogul who'd revolutionized digital security, couldn't protect their most precious asset, their connection to each other. His company, Sterling Dynamics, had made them rich beyond imagination by keeping other people's secrets safe. Yet they'd failed spectacularly at keeping their own marriage secure. She picked up the envelope her attorney had delivered that morning. Inside lay the culmination of 3 years of growing apart, 6 months of marriage counseling that felt more like business negotiations, and one devastating night that had exposed just how broken they'd become. The papers were signed on her end, dated today, their 15th wedding anniversary. The universe had a cruel sense of timing. But as Elena's eyes drifted to the silver picture frame on her desk, a candid shot from their honeymoon in Tuscany, both of them laughing at something silly Vincent had said, she noticed something she'd somehow missed during all the months of fighting and silence. In the photo, Vincent's hand rested protectively over hers, but it wasn't the gesture that caught her attention now. It was the small, faded inscription barely visible on the back of the frame, words she'd written 15 years ago. For the man who sees me, not my fears. The front door chimed, and Elena's heart lurched. Vincent was home early, which meant he'd either seen the news coverage or someone from his company had called. She heard his footsteps on the marble foyer, the same confident stride that had first attracted her at a charity gala when she was a struggling artist, and he was a young entrepreneur with more dreams than money. Elena, his voice carried a note she hadn't heard in years, vulnerability masked as determination. Please don't do this without giving us one real chance. She stared at the divorce papers, then at the photo, then at the door where the man she'd fallen in love with was waiting. Outside, camera flashes lit up the driveway like fireworks, the media feeding frenzy growing by the hour. Their private pain had become public spectacle, but maybe that exposure was exactly what they needed to finally stop hiding from each other. The phone buzzed with a text from her sister. Saw the news. Are you okay? Elena typed back quickly. I don't know who I am anymore. It was the first honest thing she'd said to anyone in months, including herself. For 3 years, she'd been playing the role of the perfect CEO's wife, hosting charity galas, managing their public image, smiling for photographers while feeling increasingly invisible in her own life. Vincent had been equally lost, pouring himself into work to avoid confronting the growing distance between them, until success became his excuse for everything they'd stopped sharing. The office door opened slowly, and Vincent appeared in the doorway. He looked older than his 42 years, exhaustion etched in lines around his green eyes. His usually perfectly styled dark hair was disheveled, his tie loosened. Small cracks in the polished exterior that had once made her feel like she was the only one who got to see the real him. The media knows about Singapore, he said quietly, not stepping into the room. And about David. Elena's stomach dropped. David Morrison, her former business partner, the man who'd helped her launch her art gallery before their brief affair nearly destroyed everything. Vincent had found out 6 months ago, and instead of fighting for their marriage, they'd both retreated into wounded silence. I know, she whispered. Someone leaked the photos from the hotel. That someone was me. The words hit her like a physical blow. Elena stared at him, the divorce papers forgotten in her lap. What? I leaked them. Vincent's voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. Not to hurt you. To force us to stop running from this. From each other. Because if we keep pretending everything's fine, we're going to lose something I'm not ready to give up. Elena felt the world tilt sideways. Everything she thought she knew about their crisis, about Vincent's reaction to her betrayal, about why their marriage had become a war zone instead of a haven. It all shifted in that moment. Her husband, the man who valued privacy above almost everything else, had exposed their most painful secret to save them. You destroyed our reputation, she breathed. Your company's stock will. I don't care about the stock. Vincent finally stepped into the room, his eyes never leaving hers. I care about us. And I realized that we've been so busy protecting our image that we forgot to protect what actually matters. Outside, another car door slammed as more reporters arrived. Their perfect life was crumbling in real time, broadcast live to the world. But for the first time in years, Elena saw something in Vincent's eyes that made her heart race the way it had when they were young and broke and had nothing but love to sustain them. He'd chosen her over everything else. The question was whether she was brave enough to choose him back. Elena's fingers traced the edge of the divorce papers as memories flooded back unbidden. 15 years ago, Vincent Sterling had been nobody's idea of a millionaire. He'd been the guy who showed up to their first date in a borrowed jacket, who'd taken her to a food truck instead of a restaurant because it was all he could afford, and who'd somehow made her feel like the most important person in the world while they sat on a park bench sharing terrible tacos. Do you remember what you said to me that first night? Vincent asked as if reading her thoughts. He'd moved closer, but still kept the desk between them, a metaphor for everything that had gone wrong. Elena closed her eyes. I said I didn't care about the tacos. You said you'd rather eat terrible food with someone real than perfect food with someone fake. His voice carried a weight of years. When did we become the fake people, Elena? The question hung in the air like an accusation. When had Vincent Sterling, the man who used to stay up all night coding because he believed technology could make the world better, become someone who measured success in quarterly reports and public appearances? When had Elena Morrison, the artist who once painted in a studio apartment with windows that didn't close properly, become someone who curated their life like a museum exhibit? Her phone buzzed insistently. Another text from her sister Maria. Elena, call me. The story's trending everywhere. Hashtag Sterling scandal. Maria knows, Elena said quietly, showing him the screen. She's probably fielding calls from reporters. Vincent's expression darkened. I should have thought about how this would affect your family. Your gallery. My gallery closed 2 years ago. The words came out sharper than she intended. You were too busy with the merger to notice. The silence that followed felt like a chasm opening between them. Vincent's face went pale. Elena, why didn't you tell me? Because you were never home. And when you were on calls with Tokyo or London, or wherever else Sterling Dynamics needed you to be. She stood up, pacing to the window where the media circus continued to grow. I told myself it was temporary, that once the company went public, once we had enough money, we'd find our way back to each other. But money, Elena had learned, didn't solve the problem of two people slowly becoming strangers. It just gave them bigger houses to feel lonely in. Vincent moved around the desk, close enough that she could smell his cologne. The same one he'd worn since their early days, one of the few things that hadn't changed. The Morrison Gallery was your dream. You should have. What? Interrupted your conference calls to cry about my failing business. Elena turned to face him, years of buried resentment finally surfacing. You want to know when our marriage started dying? It was the night I found out we were losing our biggest investor, and you came home at midnight talking about expanding into artificial intelligence. I tried to tell you about the gallery, and you said, "Can we talk about this tomorrow? I've got an early meeting." Vincent's face crumpled. I remember that night. You were in the studio. I was painting. It's what I used to do when I was scared or sad or needed to think. But you stopped asking what I was working on years ago. The accusation hit its mark. Vincent had once been fascinated by Elena's art, would spend hours watching her paint, asking about her process, her inspiration. He'd bought her first real easel, commissioned her to paint their first apartment even though they could barely afford groceries. Now, their home was filled with expensive art from other people, but nothing Elena had created in years. You painted our apartment, he said softly, the memory clearly visible in his eyes. That little place above the coffee shop. You made it beautiful. Elena felt her chest tighten. You hung that painting in your office at the first Sterling Dynamics building. You said it reminded you why you were working so hard, to build something beautiful together. I still have it, Vincent whispered. It's in my private office now. Sometimes when board meetings get brutal, I look at it and remember who I used to be. For a moment, they stood in the space of shared memory, both young again and full of dreams that hadn't yet been corrupted by success. But reality crashed back as Elena's phone rang, her lawyer's name flashing on the screen. Mr. Sterling's representative called. James Pritchard's voice was crisp and professional when she answered. They're requesting a 24-hour delay on filing. Something about wanting to make a public statement first. Elena looked at Vincent, who was watching her intently. What kind of statement? He wants to take full responsibility for the marriage's breakdown. Publicly. He's willing to admit to emotional abandonment, to prioritizing business over family. His legal team thinks it might help minimize the damage to your reputation. The phone nearly slipped from Elena's hand. Even now, even after everything, Vincent was trying to protect her. It was exactly the kind of gesture that had made her fall in love with him in the first place, and exactly the kind of self-sacrificing behavior that had driven them apart. James, I'll call you back, she managed, ending the call. You're going to destroy yourself to save me, she said to Vincent. Again, what's that supposed to mean? It means you think love is about sacrificing yourself for other people instead of sharing yourself with them. Elena's voice grew stronger, years of unspoken frustration finally finding words. You did it with your company, worked yourself to exhaustion so I could have nice things I never asked for. You did it with your family, missed your father's birthday party because you thought earning more money was more important than being present. And now you're doing it again. Vincent stepped back as if she'd slapped him. I was trying to build us a good life. We had a good life. We had love and dreams in each other. But you decided that wasn't enough. You decided we needed more money, more status, more everything except more time together. The words hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they could cross. Elena realized she was crying, tears she'd been holding back for months finally spilling over. But they weren't just tears of anger. They were tears of grief for the couple they used to be, the people they'd lost somewhere between their first million and their first magazine cover. Elena, Vincent's voice was broken. I thought I was doing what you wanted. The house, the gallery funding, the lifestyle. I never wanted the house. I wanted you. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, probably smearing her makeup, but she didn't care anymore. I wanted the man who used to dance with me in our tiny kitchen while dinner burned on the stove, who would spend his last $20 on flowers because he said they made me smile. When did you stop seeing me? The question echoed in the silence that followed. Outside, a news helicopter circled overhead, turning their private devastation into public entertainment. Their marriage was bleeding out in real time, and the whole world was watching. Vincent's phone buzzed with what was probably the 100th call from his PR team. He ignored it, his green eyes fixed on Elena's face, as if he was seeing her clearly for the first time in years. I stopped seeing you, he said slowly. The night David Morrison called to tell you he was in love with you. Elena's breath caught. That had been 8 months ago, 2 months before her affair, during the early days of trying to save the gallery. David had called her at home, drunk and confessing feelings she'd never encouraged. She'd handled it professionally, told him they needed to keep things business-focused, and thought that was the end of it. You heard that call? I came home early to surprise you. I was going to suggest we take a weekend trip, just us. Instead, I heard another man tell my wife he loved her. And instead of fighting for you, I convinced myself you deserved better than someone who was never home. Vincent's voice was raw with regret. So I started working even harder, telling myself I was giving you space to figure out what you wanted. But really, I was just running away from the possibility that you might choose someone else. Elena stared at him, understanding flooding through her like cold water. You've been waiting for me to leave you. Haven't I already lost you? Vincent asked, his mask of corporate control finally cracking completely. Isn't that why you went to Singapore with him? Because I'd already checked out of our marriage? The pain in his voice broke something open in Elena's chest. All this time, she'd thought Vincent didn't care enough to fight for their relationship. But he'd been drowning in the same loneliness she was, just from the other side of their golden cage. Her affair with David hadn't been about love or passion. It had been about feeling seen by someone, about remembering she existed as more than just Vincent Sterling's wife. But looking at her husband now, really looking at him, she realized they'd both been starving for the same thing while sitting at a table full of everything except what they actually needed. Vincent's phone rang again. This time, he answered it. This is Vincent. No, I'm not making any statements today. Because I'm trying to save my marriage, that's why. Handle it however you think best, but I'm not available until tomorrow. He hung up and turned back to Elena. 16 years ago, I promised you I'd never stop fighting for us. I broke that promise. But if you'll give me one more chance, not as the CEO of Sterling Dynamics, but as the man who fell in love with you over terrible tacos, I want to learn how to see you again. Elena looked at the divorce papers in her hand, then at the photo on the desk, then at the man she'd married who was finally, desperately, asking her to help him find his way back to being the person she'd fallen in love with. Outside, their perfect life continued to crumble under public scrutiny. But inside this room, two people who had lost each other in the pursuit of having everything were finally ready to risk it all for the one thing that had ever truly mattered. Vincent, Elena said quietly, if we're going to do this, if we're going to try to save us, we have to promise each other something. Anything. No more performing. No more pretending we're fine when we're not. No more protecting each other from the truth. She took a shaky breath. We have to be willing to lose everything we've built if that's what it takes to find each other again. Vincent's answer came without hesitation. I'd rather be broke and real with you than rich and fake without you. For the first time in months, Elena smiled. Not the practiced smile she wore for cameras, but the genuine one that had made Vincent fall in love with her 15 years ago. It was a start. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:47 p.m., cutting through the tentative hope that had begun to bloom between them. Elena and Vincent had spent the last 2 hours talking, really talking, for the first time in months. They'd ordered Chinese takeout, ignored their phones, and started the painful work of excavating the love that had been buried under years of success and silence. But the world wasn't going to wait for them to heal. Mrs. Sterling? The voice through the intercom was unfamiliar. I'm Rebecca Chen from Channel 7 News. We'd like to give you and your husband a chance to respond to David Morrison's interview. Elena's chopsticks clattered against her plate. What interview? Vincent was already pulling up news websites on his laptop, his face growing paler with each headline that loaded. Elena, you need to see this. The screen filled with David Morrison's familiar face, handsome, charming, and absolutely devastating to everything they'd just begun to rebuild. He sat across from a sympathetic interviewer in what looked like his art gallery's office, the same space where Elena had once felt creative and valued before everything went wrong. Elena Sterling is one of the most talented artists I've ever worked with, David was saying, his voice carrying the perfect note of respectful sadness. Our relationship was never about the money or the fame. It was about two people who found solace in creativity when their personal lives became overwhelming. Elena felt sick. He's making it sound like a love story. Vincent Sterling is a brilliant businessman, David continued. But genius in the boardroom doesn't always translate to understanding in the bedroom. Elena needed someone who could see her art, her passion, her beautiful soul that was slowly dying in a marriage built on corporate success rather than genuine connection. Turn it off, Elena whispered, but Vincent was transfixed by their private devastation being rewritten as a romantic tragedy. I take full responsibility for crossing professional boundaries, David said, leaning forward with practiced sincerity. But I won't apologize for loving someone who deserved to be cherished rather than collected like another acquisition. Vincent slammed the laptop shut so hard Elena jumped. In the silence that followed, they could hear reporters shouting questions outside their gate, car doors slamming, the circus growing louder by the minute. "He's positioning himself as your savior," Vincent said quietly. "And me as the villain who drove you into another man's arms." Elena's phone exploded with notifications, texts from friends, missed calls from family, social media mentions that made her stomach churn. But it was the call from her sister Maria that made her hands shake as she answered. "Elena, thank God. Are you watching the news?" "Unfortunately. It gets worse. David's calling a press conference tomorrow morning. Something about setting the record straight about Elena's artistic journey and personal struggles. And Vincent's board of directors has called an emergency meeting. There are rumors they're considering asking him to step down." Elena looked at Vincent, who was staring out the window at the media mob with an expression she'd never seen before. Not anger or hurt, but something that looked almost like relief. "Maria, I have to go." "Elena, wait. There's something else. David called me an hour ago. He wants to meet with you tomorrow before his press conference. He says he has something that belongs to you, something Vincent doesn't know about." The line went dead, leaving Elena staring at her phone in growing dread. Vincent had heard enough of the conversation to know something was wrong. "What does he have?" Vincent asked. "I don't know." But even as she said it, Elena felt a cold certainty settling in her chest. There was only one thing David could have that would matter now. Only one secret from their brief affair that could destroy everything she and Vincent were trying to rebuild. The pregnancy test from 8 months ago. The one that had been negative, but which had existed at all only because she'd been careless during those 2 weeks when she'd convinced herself her marriage was over. Vincent's phone rang, his brother Marcus calling from Seattle. Elena watched Vincent's face change as he answered, watched years of professional composure crumble as Marcus delivered whatever news couldn't wait. "I understand," Vincent said finally. "No, don't fly down here. The media circus will just get worse. Yes, I know what this means for the company. Marcus, I need you to know that Elena and I are going to fight for our marriage, regardless of what the board decides." When he hung up, Vincent looked older than his 42 years. "The board wants me to take a leave of absence. Indefinitely. They're worried about the company's reputation, especially with the government contracts coming up for renewal." Elena felt the ground shifting beneath them. Sterling Dynamics wasn't just Vincent's company. It was his identity, his purpose, the thing he'd sacrificed their marriage to build. If he lost it, he lost everything he thought made him worthy of love. "Vincent, you can't let them do this." "Fight them." "With what?" "The man my wife had an affair with just painted me as an emotionally abusive workaholic on national television. Our stock dropped 12% in the last hour. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to protect the company, even if it means throwing me overboard." Elena stood up abruptly, pacing to the window where she could see the photographers setting up for a long siege. "This is my fault. All of it. If I hadn't—" "Stop." Vincent's voice was sharp enough to cut through her spiraling guilt. "We're not doing this. We're not going to let David Morrison or the media or anyone else rewrite our story. But your company is just a company." Vincent stood up, moving to stand beside her at the window. 16 years ago, I had nothing but a computer and an idea. I built Sterling Dynamics once. I can build something else if I have to. But I can't build another you. I can't build another us." Elena stared at him, seeing something in his eyes she hadn't seen since their early days. The fierce determination of a man who knew what he wanted and was willing to risk everything to get it. This wasn't the polished CEO who measured success in market caps and quarterly reports. This was the young entrepreneur who had once worked 18-hour days not for money, but for the dream of building something meaningful with the woman he loved. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we call David's bluff. Tomorrow morning, before his press conference, we hold our own. Together. We tell our story, the real one, not the sanitized version or the tabloid version. We admit we lost our way, that we hurt each other, that we're not perfect. But we also make it clear that we're fighting for this marriage." Elena's heart was racing. "Vincent, if we do that, there's no going back. The board will definitely force you out. The media will dissect every word. Our families love us. The board can go to hell. And the media is already dissecting us." Vincent took her hands, his green eyes intense with purpose. "Elena, I leaked those photos because I was tired of living a lie. Now I want to try living the truth, publicly and completely. But I can't do it alone. Outside, another news van arrived, this one from a national network. Their private crisis was becoming a national story, their marriage the latest cautionary tale about wealth and power. But standing there with Vincent's hands in hers, Elena realized they had a choice about how this story ended. They could let other people define their narrative, David with his romantic revisionism, the media with their hunger for scandal, the board with their corporate calculations. Or they could take control of their own story, even if it meant losing everything they'd built in the process. There's something you need to know, Elena said quietly. About Singapore. About why David thinks he has leverage over us. Vincent's hands tightened on hers, but he didn't let go. Tell me. I thought I might be pregnant. It was right after our biggest fight, when you said maybe we should just accept that we wanted different things. I was scared and angry, and I didn't know how to tell you. Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. The test was negative, but David knows I took it. He was there when I bought it, when I took it, when I cried with relief because I knew bringing a child into our broken marriage would have been unfair to everyone. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Elena waited for Vincent's face to change, for the hurt and betrayal to replace the determination. Instead, his grip on her hands grew steadier. Were you relieved because you didn't want children? He asked carefully. Or because you didn't want them with me? Elena's heart broke a little more. I was relieved because I didn't want to bring a child into a home where the parents were strangers to each other. I've always wanted children with you, Vincent. But I wanted them to grow up seeing their parents in love, not just coexisting. Vincent closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, Elena saw something that took her breath away, not anger or hurt, but hope. Then we have more than our marriage to fight for, he said quietly. We have the family we might still build together, if we can find our way back to each other. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from David. Meet me tomorrow at 8 a.m. Gallery office. Come alone. You'll want to see what I have before the world does. She showed Vincent the message. Instead of the jealous rage she expected, he smiled. Not a happy smile, but the predatory grin of a man who'd just realized his opponent had overplayed their hand. He thinks he's cornering you, Vincent said. But blackmail only works if you're ashamed of the truth. What if we take away his power by telling our story first? Elena stared at the message, then at Vincent, then at the media circus outside their window. In 12 hours, their lives would change forever. They could let David Morrison control the narrative, or they could step into the fire together and emerge either burned or forged into something stronger. If we do this, Elena said slowly, we lose everything. Your company, our reputation, our privacy. We'll be starting over with nothing but each other. Sounds familiar, Vincent said, thinking of their early days when they'd had nothing but love and hope. The question is, are you willing to bet everything on us? Elena thought about the couple they'd been 15 years ago, young, broke, and absolutely certain that love could conquer anything. Then she thought about the couple they'd become, rich, successful, and slowly dying of loneliness in their golden cage. Maybe it was time to find out if love could still conquer everything, even when everything included the weight of their own mistakes. Yes, Elena said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Let's burn it all down and see if we can build something real from the ashes. Vincent kissed her then, soft and desperate, and full of the kind of hope that felt dangerous. Outside, the world waited to judge them. But inside their house, their home, two people who had lost each other in the pursuit of success were finally ready to risk everything for the chance to fall in love all over again. They had less than 12 hours to prepare for the fight of their lives. But for the first time in years, they were fighting together instead of against each other. It was a start. Elena woke at 5:47 a.m. to the sound of helicopters circling overhead and Vincent's empty side of the bed still warm. Through the bedroom's sheer curtains, she could see the media encampment had tripled overnight. News trucks lined their street like an occupying army, and photographers with telephoto lenses had taken positions on every neighboring rooftop. She found Vincent in his home office, dressed in jeans and a simple blue button-down instead of his usual corporate armor. He was on a video call with his brother Marcus, who looked exhausted despite the early hour in Seattle. Telling you, Vince, the board's already made up their minds, Marcus was saying. Thompson called an hour ago. They're not just asking for your resignation. They want you to sell your shares back to the company at a discount to minimize disruption to stakeholder confidence. Elena stepped into frame beside Vincent, and Marcus's expression softened slightly. Elena, how are you holding up? Like someone who's about to lose everything but finally found what matters, she answered honestly. Marcus studied them both through the screen. You two look different. More like yourselves, if that makes sense. It makes perfect sense, Vincent said, reaching for Elena's hand. Marcus, I need you to know something. Whatever happens today, Elena and I are going to be fine. We're going to fight for this marriage, and we're going to win. Even if it costs you sterling dynamics? Vincent's answer came without hesitation. Especially if it costs me sterling dynamics. I built that company to prove I was worthy of love. Turns out I already had love. I just forgot how to see it. After they ended the call, Elena curled up in the chair across from Vincent's desk. In the early morning light, surrounded by the awards and accolades of his corporate success, he looked more relaxed than she'd seen him in years. I have to meet David in 2 hours, Elena said quietly. I know, and I'll be meeting with the board at the same time. Vincent's fingers traced patterns on his desk, a nervous habit from their early days. Elena, whatever David shows you today, whatever he threatens, remember that we're not the same people who made those mistakes. We're not even the same people we were yesterday. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Saw the news. Your father and I are driving down from Sacramento. We'll be there this afternoon. We love you both. My parents are coming, Elena said, showing Vincent the message. Good. You'll need your family today. Vincent stood up, moving to the window where he could see reporters interviewing their neighbors. Elena, there's something I haven't told you about yesterday, about why I really leaked those photos. Elena's stomach tightened. What do you mean? David Morrison called me 3 weeks ago. He said he had evidence that would destroy your reputation if I didn't step away from you quietly. Photos, emails, personal things from your time together. Vincent's voice was steady, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. He gave me 48 hours to decide whether I wanted to be known as the husband who fought for his wife or the man who lost her because he wasn't worthy of keeping her. The revelation hit Elena like a physical blow. He was blackmailing you. He was offering me an out. A way to end our marriage while making it look like your choice, your failure. All I had to do was nothing. Just let him paint me as the absent workaholic while he swooped in as your artistic savior. Vincent turned from the window, his green eyes blazing. But I realized that losing you quietly would destroy me more completely than losing you in a public fight. At least this way, we had a chance. Elena stood up, understanding flooding through her like cold water. So you leaked the photos to force his hand. To make him play his cards before he was ready. I gambled everything on the hope that you'd choose to fight for us instead of running away with him. Vincent's voice dropped to a whisper. Was I wrong? Elena crossed the room and kissed him, fierce and desperate and full of 15 years of love that had been buried under success and silence. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. You magnificent, brilliant, crazy man, Elena breathed. You risked everything on us. It was the best investment I ever made. Elena's phone rang, David's number flashing on the screen. Vincent nodded and she answered on speaker. Elena, I trust you saw the interview last night? David's voice was smooth, confident. I hope you understand I was trying to protect your reputation. The narrative needed to be controlled. What do you want, David? Just to see you. One last time before we both move forward with our lives. I have something that belongs to you. Something Vincent would probably prefer stayed private. Elena caught Vincent's eye, seeing her own determination reflected there. I'll be there at 8. Come alone, Elena. This conversation is between you and me. After she hung up, Vincent pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like armor against the world. He thinks he's cornering you, Vincent murmured against her hair. But we're going to turn his trap into our launching pad. At exactly 7:45 a.m., Elena pulled her car through the back entrance of the Morrison Gallery, grateful for the tinted windows that hid her from the photographers who'd followed her across town. David was waiting in his office, looking every inch the successful gallery owner in his perfectly tailored suit and designer glasses. Elena. He stood as she entered, his smile warm and practiced. You look beautiful, despite everything. What do you have, David? He gestured to a manila envelope on his desk. Insurance, you could call it. Photos from Singapore that didn't make it into yesterday's leak. More intimate ones. Plus some very personal conversations we had about your marriage, about Vincent's shortcomings as a husband. Elena picked up the envelope, her hands steady despite the storm in her chest. Inside were indeed more photos, her and David in the hotel restaurant, walking along the harbor, laughing at something he'd said. But these weren't the devastating evidence she'd expected. They were just normal. Two people having dinner, working together, sharing a professional relationship that had briefly crossed personal lines. These don't show anything scandalous, Elena said. No, but they show a woman who was happy. Genuinely happy, in a way she never looks with her husband. David stepped closer, his voice dropping to the intimate tone she remembered from their brief affair. Elena, you deserve better than a man who sees you as another acquisition. You deserve someone who understands your art, your passion, your beautiful soul. Elena stared at the photos, remembering that trip to Singapore. She had been happy, but not because of David. She'd been happy because for the first time in months, she'd felt like herself again. She'd been working, creating, problem-solving instead of just existing in the golden cage of her marriage. You're right, Elena said quietly. I was happy in Singapore. David's smile widened. I knew you'd remember. I was happy because I remembered who I was outside of being Vincent Sterling's wife. But David, that happiness had nothing to do with you. Elena set the photos down, meeting his eyes directly. You were just convenient. You were there when I was lonely and lost, and you made me feel special. But feeling special isn't the same as being loved. David's expression darkened. Elena, you're making a mistake. Vincent Sterling is going to lose everything today. His company, his reputation, his fortune. Are you really going to chain yourself to a sinking ship? I'm not chaining myself to anything. I'm choosing to fight for something real. Elena moved toward the door. And David, you might want to watch the news in about 20 minutes. She left him standing in his office, confusion replacing his confident smile. As she drove back across town, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Complete certainty about who she was and what she wanted. At Sterling Dynamics headquarters, Vincent was facing his own moment of truth. The boardroom on the 42nd floor felt more like a courtroom, with 12 board members sitting in judgment across the polished mahogany table. Margaret Thompson, the lead director, looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Vincent, we've known each other for 8 years, Thompson began. You've built this company into something extraordinary. But the events of the last 24 hours have created an untenable situation. I understand the board's concerns, Vincent replied, his voice calm despite the magnitude of the moment. But I'd like to propose an alternative to my resignation. The board members exchanged glances. This wasn't the script they'd expected. We're listening, Thompson said carefully. Vincent stood up, moving to the wall of windows that overlooked the city he'd conquered through sheer determination and 18-hour days. Sterling Dynamics was built on the principle that security comes from transparency, not secrecy. We protect our clients by bringing their vulnerabilities into the light so they can be addressed. Vincent, where is this going? I'm suggesting we apply that same principle to ourselves. Instead of trying to manage this crisis through damage control and corporate spin, what if we use it as an opportunity to demonstrate our values? Vincent turned back to face the board. What if Sterling Dynamics becomes the first major corporation to prove that personal integrity and professional excellence aren't mutually exclusive? Board member James Crawford leaned forward. You're talking about turning your personal scandal into a corporate mission statement. I'm talking about showing the world that we practice what we preach. That when we tell clients transparency builds trust, we mean it. That when we say security comes from facing problems head-on rather than hiding from them, we're willing to live by those words ourselves. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text from Elena. David had nothing but old photos and empty threats. Heading to the press conference location. I love you, he smiled, feeling a surge of confidence that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or market share. Ladies and gentlemen, in about 15 minutes, my wife and I are going to hold a press conference. We're going to tell the truth about our marriage, our mistakes, and our commitment to rebuilding our relationship. We're going to demonstrate that Sterling Dynamics is led by people who have the courage to be vulnerable, to admit fault, and to fight for what matters. Vincent, Thompson said slowly, are you asking us to bet the company's reputation on your marriage? I'm asking you to bet the company's reputation on the principle that authenticity is the foundation of all real security. Vincent gathered his papers, preparing to leave. In 1 hour, you'll know whether Elena and I are the kind of leaders Sterling Dynamics deserves. Until then, I respectfully request that you hold off on any final decisions. He walked out of the boardroom with more confidence than he'd felt in years, leaving 12 board members staring after him in various states of shock and admiration. Outside Sterling Dynamics, Elena was setting up for the press conference that would change their lives forever. The location wasn't accidental. They'd chosen the park where Vincent had taken her on their first date, where they'd shared terrible tacos and perfect dreams 15 years ago. Media crews scrambled to set up equipment as Elena tested the microphone. Her phone buzzed with messages from family, friends, and supporters she hadn't heard from in years. But it was the text from Vincent's assistant that made her smile. "The board meeting is going better than expected. He's magnificent. You both are." At exactly 9 a.m., Vincent appeared at Elena's side, taking her hand as they faced the wall of cameras and reporters. In the distance, Elena could see David Morrison's press conference location, a prestigious hotel ballroom where he'd planned to control the narrative of their story. But here, in the park where their love story had begun, Elena and Vincent Sterling were about to prove that some things were worth fighting for, even if it meant losing everything else. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena began, her voice strong and clear, "thank you for coming. My husband and I have a story to tell, not the version you've heard from others, but the truth about love, loss, and the choice to fight for something real." In the crowd, Elena spotted David Morrison himself, his face a mask of barely controlled fury as he realized his carefully orchestrated manipulation had been turned into their moment of liberation. Vincent squeezed Elena's hand, and she squeezed back. They were about to risk everything on the belief that love, real, flawed, hard-fought love, was stronger than fear, stronger than shame, stronger than the forces trying to tear them apart. The questions from reporters came like bullets, but Elena and Vincent answered them together, their voices weaving the story of a marriage that had almost died and was choosing to be reborn. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was the beginning of everything. The press conference ended at 10:47 a.m. with spontaneous applause from reporters, something Elena had never seen before. She and Vincent had laid their souls bare for 37 minutes, admitting to their failures while demonstrating the kind of authentic connection that made even cynical journalists believe in love again. "That was incredible," Vincent whispered in her ear as they walked hand in hand back to their car, ignoring the shouted follow-up questions. "Did you see David's face when we talked about choosing truth over image?" Elena had seen it. David Morrison standing at the back of the crowd, his carefully orchestrated manipulation crumbling as Elena and Vincent turned their vulnerability into strength. For the first time in months, she felt like they were going to be okay. Vincent's phone buzzed with a call from Marcus. "This is it," Vincent said, accepting the call on speaker. "Marcus, please tell me you watched." "Vince, you need to get to the Sterling building immediately." Marcus's voice was tight with panic. "Don't talk to anyone, don't answer any questions. Just get here now." "What's wrong?" "I thought the press conference went." "The press conference was perfect. That's the problem." "Vince, I'm at the office, and I need you to see something before the board reconvenes." "Elena, you need to come too." Elena and Vincent exchanged glances. Marcus had been Vincent's anchor through everything, his older brother, his first investor, his most trusted advisor. If Marcus was panicked, something was catastrophically wrong. They arrived at Sterling Dynamics to find the building in chaos. Employees whispered in clusters, security guards looked tense, and Vincent's assistant Rebecca met them at the elevator with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry," Rebecca said. "I tried to stop them, but they had authorization." "Stop who?" Vincent demanded. "The FBI. They've been here for 2 hours, seizing computers and files. Something about financial irregularities and potential securities fraud." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "Vincent, I don't understand," Vincent said, but his voice carried a note of growing dread. "Rebecca, where's my brother?" "Conference room 42. He's waiting for you." The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt endless. Elena watched Vincent's face cycle through confusion, denial, and finally a terrible understanding that made her heart ache for him. Whatever was waiting in that conference room was going to destroy him in a way no corporate takeover or media scandal ever could. Marcus was sitting alone at the massive conference table, staring at a stack of documents spread before him. He looked up when they entered, and Elena saw something in his eyes that made her step instinctively closer to Vincent. "Sit down," Marcus said quietly. "Both of you." Vincent remained standing. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" "Rebecca said the FBI. I called them." Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. "This morning, after your press conference, I called the federal agents who've been investigating Sterling Dynamics for the past 6 months." The words hit Vincent like physical blows. "What?" Marcus gestured to the documents on the table. "Vincent, You've been so focused on your marriage that you missed what was happening in your own company. For 2 years, someone has been systematically embezzling funds, falsifying contracts, and manipulating stock prices. The total damage is approximately $47 million. Elena sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Who would do that? Marcus looked directly at Vincent, his expression unreadable. You would apparently. According to the evidence the FBI has been building, Vincent Sterling has been using his CEO position to funnel money into offshore accounts while his personal life fell apart. That's impossible, Vincent said, his voice hollow. Marcus, you know I would never. I know what the evidence shows. Marcus pushed a folder across the table. Bank records showing transfers authorized with your digital signature. Emails from your computer discussing the embezzlement. Security footage of you accessing the company's financial systems at unusual hours. Vincent opened the folder with shaking hands, and Elena watched the color drain from his face as he flipped through page after page of damning evidence. Someone forged this. Someone who had access to my systems, my signatures. Someone who knew your passwords, your security protocols, your exact schedule. Marcus's voice was getting colder. Someone who could move freely through the building without suspicion. Someone who understood the company's financial systems as well as you do. Elena felt a terrible understanding beginning to dawn. Marcus, what are you saying? I'm saying that Vincent Sterling has been embezzling from his own company to fund a lifestyle his legitimate salary couldn't support. I'm saying he got careless when his marriage started falling apart, made mistakes that exposed his criminal activity. Marcus stood up, his resemblance to Vincent suddenly looking sinister instead of comforting. And I'm saying that I've been documenting his crimes for 6 months, waiting for the right moment to turn him in. Vincent stared at his older brother, the man who'd co-signed his first business loan, who'd worked 18-hour days to help build Sterling Dynamics, who'd been best man at his wedding and godfather to the children he and Elena had always planned to have. You're framing me, Vincent whispered. You're destroying me. I'm saving the company from you. Marcus's mask of brotherly concern finally slipped, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Sterling Dynamics is too important to let you destroy it with your personal drama. The board already voted this morning. You're out, I'm in, and the company will survive this scandal by cooperating fully with federal investigators. Elena felt sick as the pieces fell into place. The affair. The leaked photos. David Morrison's interview. You orchestrated all of it. Marcus smiled, and it was nothing like Vincent's warm expression. David Morrison is a useful idiot who thinks he's protecting the woman he loves. I simply provided him with information and suggestions about how to handle the situation. He never knew he was helping me destroy Vincent's credibility before the financial evidence came to light. But why? Vincent's voice broke on the word. Marcus, I built this company to share with you. Everything I have is yours too. Everything you have should have been mine from the beginning. Marcus's composure cracked, revealing years of buried resentment. I'm 2 years older than you, Vincent. I was the one who understood business, who had the connections, who put up the initial capital. But you were the golden boy with the pretty wife and the media attention. You were the face of Sterling Dynamics while I did the actual work of running it. Elena reached for Vincent's hand, feeling him tremble as his entire world collapsed. Vincent, we need to call a lawyer. We need to. You need to understand something, Marcus interrupted. The FBI has enough evidence to put Vincent away for 20 years. But they might be willing to consider a plea deal if he cooperates fully, admits his guilt, and helps them recover the stolen funds. I didn't steal anything, Vincent said, but his voice lacked conviction. The evidence was overwhelming, clearly planted by someone with intimate knowledge of his systems and schedules. Marcus pulled out his phone, showing them a news alert. The story is already breaking. Sterling Dynamics CEO arrested for embezzlement. Your touching press conference this morning is being recontextualized as the desperate performance of a man trying to distract from his financial crimes. Elena watched Vincent's face crumble as he realized the scope of his brother's betrayal. Marcus hadn't just stolen money. He'd stolen Vincent's identity, his reputation, his life's work. The press conference that had felt like their triumph was now being painted as evidence of his guilt. The board believes Vincent became unstable after his affair was exposed, Marcus continued, his voice almost gentle now. They believe the stress of his failing marriage drove him to desperate measures. His erratic behavior, the leaked photos, the public spectacle. It all supports the narrative of a man whose judgment was compromised by personal crisis. Vincent's phone buzzed with a call from their lawyer, but Marcus held up a hand. Before you answer that, you should know that Elena is named as a person of interest in the investigation. The FBI believes she may have been aware of the embezzlement, possibly even complicit in it. Marcus's smile was razor-sharp. After all, she was living an expensive lifestyle while claiming her art gallery was failing. She took multiple trips to Singapore and other international locations that could have been used to move money offshore. Elena felt the world tilt sideways. I was working. My gallery really was failing. But can you prove that? Can you account for every dollar you spent, every trip you took, every conversation you had with Vincent about money? Marcus leaned forward. Because the prosecution will argue that your affair with David Morrison was cover for international financial crimes, that your marriage counseling sessions were actually meetings to coordinate money laundering. Vincent stood up abruptly, his chair crashing backward. Enough. Marcus, whatever you want, my shares in the company, my resignation, everything, just leave Elena out of this. Vincent, no, Elena grabbed his arm. We're not separating. We just found each other again. Elena, if you stay with me, you'll go to prison too. Vincent's eyes were wild with panic and love and desperate protection. I won't let that happen. I won't let him destroy you. Marcus watched this exchange with satisfaction. There is another option. Vincent could disappear, leave the country, start over somewhere without extradition treaties. The investigation would focus on recovering assets rather than prosecuting a fugitive. Elena could divorce him publicly, claim she was an innocent victim of his deception. Like I said, we're not separating, Elena said firmly, even as her heart broke watching Vincent consider Marcus's terrible offer. Vincent's phone rang again, this time with a number Elena didn't recognize. Vincent answered cautiously. Mr. Sterling? This is Agent Sarah Chun with the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force. We need you to come in for questioning immediately. You have the right to have an attorney present, but I should inform you that a federal warrant has been issued for your arrest. Vincent hung up and turned to Elena, his green eyes full of a love so fierce it took her breath away. Elena, I need you to listen to me. I need you to take the divorce papers we never filed and make them public today. I need you to tell the world that you're leaving me because you discovered I was a criminal. Absolutely not. If you don't, Marcus will make sure you go down with me. He's spent 2 years building this frame, and he's not going to let you survive as a witness to his guilt. Vincent cupped Elena's face in his hands. I love you more than my freedom, more than my life. Please don't make me watch you pay for my brother's crimes. Elena stared at the man she'd married 15 years ago, the man she'd rediscovered just yesterday, the man who was once again willing to sacrifice himself for her happiness. But this time, she wasn't going to let him. Vincent Sterling, she said firmly, I told you yesterday that we were done performing for other people. I meant it. If you think I'm going to abandon you now, when you need me most, then you don't know me at all. Marcus checked his watch. You have about 10 minutes before the FBI arrives. I suggest you use that time wisely. Outside the conference room windows, Elena could see news helicopters circling the building. Their morning of triumph had become an afternoon of devastation, and the man who'd orchestrated it was Vincent's own brother, the person he'd trusted most in the world. But as Elena looked at Vincent, she realized something that gave her hope even in this darkest moment. They weren't facing this destruction as the disconnected strangers they'd been yesterday. They were facing it as partners, as lovers, as two people who'd chosen each other over everything else. Marcus might have stolen Vincent's company and his freedom, but he couldn't steal what mattered most, the love they'd fought so hard to reclaim. Vincent, Elena said quietly, remember what you told me about building Sterling Dynamics the first time? Vincent's eyes met hers, understanding flickering in their depths. I said we could do anything as long as we did it together. Then let's prove that's still true. They had 9 minutes to figure out how to survive the betrayal that was supposed to destroy them. But they had each other, and for the first time in days, that felt like enough. Agent Sarah Chun arrived at Sterling Dynamics with 3 other federal agents and enough handcuffs to arrest half the executive team. Elena watched from the conference room window as they filed through the lobby, their faces set with the grim determination of people who'd built an airtight case. Vincent, Marcus said quietly, checking his phone, you have about 2 minutes before they reach this floor. I'm going to ask you one more time. Will you make this easy on yourself and Elena, or do we have to do this the hard way? Vincent's answer came in the form of action rather than words. He pulled Elena close and kissed her with desperate intensity, as if he could pour 15 years of love into a single moment. When they broke apart, both of them were crying. "Whatever happens next," Vincent whispered against her forehead, "remember that everything I did was for us. Everything I'm about to do is for you." Before Elena could ask what he meant, Vincent's phone rang. The caller ID showed David Morrison's number. "Don't answer it," Elena said quickly, but Vincent was already accepting the call. "David, what do you want?" David's voice was tight with panic when he answered on speaker. "Vincent, I need to see Elena immediately. Something's happened, something that changes everything. The FBI just left my gallery, and they think Elena and I were working together to move money offshore." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible. They have financial records showing large payments from Sterling Dynamics to my gallery over the past 2 years. Payments that were supposedly for Elena's artwork, but the pieces don't exist. They think we created fake art sales to launder embezzled funds." Marcus's smile was triumphant. "I told you the net was wider than you realized." Vincent's voice was deadly calm. "David, how much did they say?" $2.7 million. "Vincent, I swear I never received any money from your company. Someone's using my gallery to frame both of you." Elena grabbed Vincent's arm. "It's Marcus. He's been planning this for years, using your company to create fake transactions." "Elena, stop talking," Vincent said sharply. "David, where are you now?" "My lawyer's office." "Elena, they want to arrest you too. You need to disappear until we can prove." The line went dead. Vincent stared at the phone, then at Elena, then at his brother who was watching their destruction with professional satisfaction. "The beauty of a long con," Marcus said conversationally, "is that every piece of evidence supports every other piece. Vincent embezzles money, Elena helps him launder it through her boyfriend's gallery, and the affair provides emotional cover for their financial crimes. It's actually quite elegant." Elena heard the elevator doors opening down the hall, followed by official voices and footsteps that sounded like a death march. In 30 seconds, her husband would be arrested for crimes he didn't commit, and she would become a fugitive from a justice system that had already decided her guilt. "Vincent, we run," Elena said urgently. "Right now. We leave everything and we run." "Elena, if we run, we look guilty. If we stay and fight, you go to prison." Vincent took her hands, his green eyes full of a pain that went deeper than any physical injury. "And if I turn myself in and cooperate, maybe I can convince them you're innocent." "No." Elena's voice was fierce. "We promised each other, no more sacrificing, no more protecting each other from the truth. We face this together." Marcus cleared his throat. "Actually, there's a fourth option you haven't considered." Both Elena and Vincent turned to stare at him. The footsteps in the hallway were getting closer. "I could make the evidence against Elena disappear," Marcus said quietly. "The fake art sales, the offshore connections, all of it. In exchange for Vincent's full cooperation with my version of events." "What kind of cooperation?" Vincent asked, though Elena could see he already knew the answer would be devastating. "A full confession. On camera, with the FBI recording. Vincent Sterling admits to embezzling $47 million from his own company to fund an extravagant lifestyle and shore up his failing marriage. He admits to using his wife's art gallery connections to launder money, but maintains that Elena was an unwitting victim of his manipulation." Elena felt sick. "You want him to lie about everything." "I want him to take responsibility for the consequences of his actions," Marcus replied smoothly. Vincent chose to put his personal drama ahead of the company's welfare. Vincent chose to have a public meltdown that made Sterling Dynamics vulnerable to investigation. Vincent chose to leak photos and create scandals that destroyed shareholder confidence. "Those aren't crimes," Elena protested. "They are when they provide cover for financial crimes," Marcus said. The confession would include an explanation that Vincent's embezzlement began as a desperate attempt to save his marriage. Funding Elena's gallery, paying for expensive trips and gifts to win her back, ultimately leading to increasingly desperate measures as his attempts to reconcile failed. Vincent was staring at his brother with something approaching awe. "You've thought of everything." "I've had 2 years to think of everything." Marcus checked his watch again. 30 seconds, Vincent. Elena goes free, and you go to minimum security federal prison for 7 to 10 years with possibility of parole in 5. Or you both go to maximum security for 20 years, and your love story becomes a cautionary tale about how greed destroys families. The conference room door opened, and Agent Chen entered with 2 other agents. Elena's last seconds of freedom ticked by as she watched Vincent's face cycle through love, desperation, and terrible resolve. "Vincent Sterling," Agent Chen announced. "You're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and securities fraud. You have the right to remain silent." Vincent held up a hand. "Agent Chen, I'd like to cooperate fully with your investigation. I'm prepared to make a complete confession in exchange for immunity for my wife, who was unaware of my financial crimes." "Vincent, no." Elena lunged toward him, but Marcus caught her arm. "Elena Sterling," Agent Chen continued, "you're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering and aiding in financial fraud." The handcuffs clicked around Elena's wrists with a sound like a door slamming shut. As they led her and Vincent toward the elevator, Elena saw Marcus straightening his tie and preparing to address the assembled Sterling Dynamics employees as their new CEO. "This is just the beginning," Marcus called after them. "Vincent, when you're ready to protect the woman you love, you know how to reach me." The elevator doors closed on Marcus's satisfied smile, and Elena found herself pressed against Vincent in the small space, both of them handcuffed and surrounded by federal agents. Through the elevator's glass walls, she could see Sterling Dynamics employees watching their perp walk with expressions ranging from shock to betrayal. "Mrs. Sterling," Agent Chen said quietly, "if you cooperate with our investigation, things could go much easier for you. We're particularly interested in your relationship with David Morrison and the nature of your trips to Singapore." Elena looked at Vincent, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. "Agent Chen, I want a lawyer. And so does my husband." "Elena," Vincent said urgently, "please listen to what they're offering." "We're not separating," Elena said firmly. "Not for Marcus, not for the FBI, not for anyone. We promised each other." The elevator reached the ground floor, and Elena could see the media mob waiting outside the building's glass doors. Their story had become a feeding frenzy. The millionaire couple who'd proclaimed their love that morning, now being arrested for financial crimes by evening. As they were led through the lobby, Elena caught sight of her reflection in the polished marble walls. 12 hours ago, she'd been preparing for a press conference about saving her marriage. Now she was heading to federal prison, and the man she'd just rediscovered was being forced to choose between protecting her and protecting the truth. Agent Chen opened the building's front door, and the roar of reporters hit them like a physical force. Camera flashes turned the world into a strobe light of chaos as Elena and Vincent were led to separate FBI vehicles. "Elena!" Vincent called out as they guided him toward the first car. "Remember what I told you about building something from nothing?" "Vincent!" Elena shouted back as her own door opened. "Remember what you said about doing anything as long as we did it together?" The car doors slammed shut, separating them for the first time since they'd decided to fight for their marriage. Elena watched through the rear window as Vincent's car pulled away in the opposite direction, taking him toward a federal holding facility while she headed to a different location entirely. In the sudden quiet of the FBI vehicle, Elena finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what they'd lost. Their home, their fortune, their freedom, their reputation. Everything they'd built together over 15 years had been systematically destroyed by the person Vincent trusted most. But as Agent Chen read her rights from the front seat, Elena realized something that gave her strength even in this darkest moment. Marcus had underestimated the very thing he'd been trying to destroy. He thought love was about protecting each other from consequences, about sacrificing oneself for the other's benefit. He didn't understand that real love was about facing consequences together, about choosing each other even when that choice led to disaster. Elena's phone, which somehow hadn't been confiscated yet, buzzed with a text message. For a moment, she thought it might be Vincent, somehow finding a way to reach her. Instead, the message was from a number she didn't recognize. "Elena, this is Rebecca, Mr. Sterling's assistant. I managed to download files from Vincent's computer before the FBI seizure. I think I can prove Marcus forged the evidence. But I need to know, are you and Mr. Sterling really going to fight this together? Because what I have will only work if you're both brave enough to risk everything for the truth." Elena stared at the message, hope blooming in her chest for the first time since Agent Chen had walked through the conference room door. Marcus thought he'd won by separating them, by forcing them to choose between love and freedom. But he'd forgotten that Elena and Vincent had already chosen each other over everything else. Now they just had to prove that love was stronger than the most elaborate betrayal, stronger than a rigged system, stronger than the fear of losing everything. Elena typed back carefully. "We're not going anywhere. We're going to fight." Outside the car window, The city that had made them rich and famous blurred past like a dream they were waking up from. Somewhere in another FBI vehicle, Vincent was probably receiving the same message from Rebecca, making the same choice Elena was making. They'd lost everything Marcus could take from them. Now they were about to discover what remained when everything else was stripped away. It was time to find out if love really could conquer all, even when all included the entire weight of the federal justice system and a 2-year conspiracy designed to destroy them. The car pulled into the federal building's parking garage, and Elena Sterling prepared to fight for her marriage from inside a jail cell. She'd never been more terrified or more certain of anything in her life. Elena's federal holding cell was an 8x10 concrete box that smelled like disinfectant and despair. She'd been there for 6 hours, long enough to memorize every crack in the painted walls and to realize that wealth meant nothing when you were wearing an orange jumpsuit that reeked of the previous occupant's fear. The door buzzed open at 11:47 p.m., and Agent Chin entered with a folder thick enough to represent the destruction of Elena's entire life. "Mrs. Sterling, your lawyer is here," Agent Chin announced. "But before you meet with him, I need you to understand something. Your husband made a choice tonight that's going to affect both of your futures." Elena's heart stopped. What kind of choice? He refused the plea deal. Completely. Despite facing 20 years in federal prison, Vincent Sterling has decided to fight all charges. His lawyer says he's prepared to go to trial and take his chances with a jury. Elena closed her eyes, feeling a mixture of pride and terror that made her dizzy. Vincent had chosen truth over safety, their unity over his freedom. It was exactly what she'd hoped he would do, and exactly what she'd feared he would do. "Agent Chen, what does that mean for me?" "It means you're both going to trial for financial crimes that carry mandatory minimum sentences. It means the prosecution is going to paint you as co-conspirators who used love as a cover for greed." Agent Chen's voice softened slightly. "Mrs. Sterling, your husband is risking everything on the belief that you'll be acquitted. But the evidence against you is substantial, and juries don't like wealthy defendants who claim innocence." Elena was led to a small conference room where her court-appointed attorney, Michael Santos, was waiting with Rebecca Martinez, Vincent's assistant, who looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Mrs. Sterling," Santos began, "I'm going to be direct with you. Your husband's decision to reject the plea deal has put you in an extremely dangerous position. The prosecution is offering you the same deal they offered him: 7 years minimum security in exchange for a full confession and cooperation. And if I refuse, 20 years maximum security, and that's if we're lucky at trial." Elena looked at Rebecca, who was clutching a laptop bag like a lifeline. "You said you had evidence that could help us." Rebecca nodded, opening her laptop with shaking hands. "Mrs. Sterling, I've been Mr. Sterling's assistant for 4 years. I know his habits, his passwords, his schedule better than anyone except maybe you. And I know he didn't commit these crimes." The laptop screen filled with financial records, email logs, and security footage timestamps. Rebecca had been busy during the 6 hours since the arrests. "This is Marcus Sterling's computer activity for the past 2 years, Rebecca explained, pointing to rows of data. "Every fake transaction, every forged email, every manipulated record. It was all done from his personal account, but using Vincent's stolen credentials." Santos leaned forward. "How did you get access to Marcus Sterling's personal files?" "Because I used to be his assistant before I transferred to Vincent's office," Rebecca said quietly. "Marcus never changed his passwords. He's arrogant that way. Doesn't think the help notices things like computer security." Elena stared at the screen, seeing months of meticulous planning laid out in digital breadcrumbs. "This proves Vincent is innocent." "It proves Marcus is guilty," Santos corrected. "But presenting this evidence means admitting that Vincent's assistant illegally accessed private computer systems. Rebecca could face federal charges for hacking, and the evidence might be thrown out as inadmissible." Elena looked at Rebecca, this young woman who was risking her freedom to save theirs. "Rebecca, why are you doing this?" "Because Mr. Sterling gave me a chance when no one else would. I was a single mother with a criminal record for check fraud, something I did to feed my daughter when her father abandoned us. Vincent hired me anyway, helped me get my accounting degree, treated me like family." Rebecca's voice was fierce with loyalty. "But more than that, Mrs. Sterling, what you and Mr. Sterling did this morning, that press conference about choosing love over image, it reminded me why I believe good people deserve to win sometimes." Santos pulled up another document on his own tablet. "There's something else you need to know. David Morrison was arrested 2 hours ago. Elena's stomach lurched. For what? Conspiracy to commit fraud. The FBI believes he was your partner in the money laundering scheme. But here's the interesting part. Morrison is claiming he was framed by Marcus Sterling, that Marcus approached him months ago with a plan to destroy Vincent's marriage and take over the company. Is David telling the truth? Probably. But his credibility is compromised because of his affair with you. The prosecution will argue that he's lying to protect you because he's in love with you. Elena felt the walls closing in around them. Every attempt to prove their innocence was being twisted into evidence of their guilt. Marcus had built a trap so elaborate that even the truth looked like a lie. Mrs. Sterling, Santos continued, I need you to understand something. If you and your husband both go to trial and lose, you'll be separated for 20 years. Your marriage won't survive that kind of separation. But if one of you takes the plea deal... No. Elena's voice was firm. Vincent and I discussed this. We're not sacrificing each other anymore. Rebecca looked up from her laptop. Mrs. Sterling, there might be another way. But it's dangerous, and it requires you to trust someone you have good reason not to trust. What do you mean? Rebecca pulled up a new file, transcripts of phone calls and text messages. I've been monitoring Marcus Sterling's communications since the arrests. He's panicking. The FBI investigation is more thorough than he expected, and they're asking questions about his personal finances that he didn't anticipate. Elena read over the transcripts, seeing Marcus's growing desperation as federal agents dug deeper into Sterling Dynamics records. He'd been so focused on framing Vincent that he'd left traces of his own crimes exposed. More importantly, Rebecca continued, Marcus has been trying to reach you. He wants to make a deal. Santos frowned. What kind of deal? He's offering to modify his testimony, to claim that Vincent was a victim of embezzlement rather than a perpetrator. In exchange, he wants Elena to publicly support his version of events and help him maintain control of Sterling Dynamics. Elena stared at the offer, understanding its terrible implications. Marcus was offering to save Vincent in exchange for Elena's complicity in his takeover of the company. It would mean freedom for both of them, but it would also mean validating Marcus's betrayal and allowing him to profit from his crimes. It's a trap, Elena said quietly. Of course it's a trap, Rebecca agreed. But it might also be our only chance to get Marcus on record admitting his guilt. Mrs. Sterling, what if you agreed to meet with him while wearing a wire? Santos shook his head. Absolutely not. If something goes wrong, Elena could be charged with obstruction of justice or witness tampering. The risks are enormous. Elena's phone, which had somehow been returned to her during the lawyer meeting, buzzed with a text from Vincent. Elena, whatever choice you're facing, remember that I love you more than my freedom. Choose what keeps you safe. Even now, even facing 20 years in prison, Vincent was trying to protect her. It was the same impulse that had driven him to work 18-hour days, the same misguided love that had nearly destroyed their marriage in the first place. But Elena finally understood the difference between love that protects and love that empowers. Vincent was asking her to choose safety over truth, just like she'd once asked him to choose success over connection. They'd both been wrong. I'll do it, Elena said quietly. I'll meet with Marcus and get him to confess. Elena, it's too dangerous, Santos began. Everything is dangerous now. Our marriage almost died because we tried to protect each other from hard truths. I'm not going to let Vincent go to prison because I was too afraid to take a risk. Rebecca smiled for the first time since Elena had met her. Mrs. Sterling, I think Mr. Sterling is going to be very proud of you. Elena looked at Vincent's text message again, then typed back. Vincent, I'm done choosing what keeps me safe. I'm choosing what keeps us together. The reply came immediately. Then I'm choosing the same thing. Whatever happens next, we face it side by side. Elena showed the message to Rebecca and Santos. In different cells across the city, she and Vincent were making the same impossible choice. To risk everything on love, on truth, on the belief that some things were worth fighting for even when the odds were stacked against them. Rebecca, set up the meeting with Marcus, Elena said. And make sure the FBI knows what we're planning. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Santos was already pulling out his phone to call the federal prosecutor. Mrs. Sterling, I have to advise you that you're about to attempt something that could either exonerate you completely or add another 20 years to your sentence. I understand. But Santos, I need you to understand something too. 15 years ago, my husband and I promised to face life together. the good and the bad, the triumphs and the disasters. We broke that promise when we got rich and comfortable. We're not breaking it again. As Elena was led back to her cell to await the meeting that would determine their fate, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Complete certainty about who she was and what she valued. She was Elena Sterling, wife of Vincent Sterling, and she was done running from the truth. Marcus had spent 2 years orchestrating their destruction. Tomorrow morning, Elena was going to give him the chance to destroy himself. It was the biggest gamble of her life, but she was no longer playing for money or status or safety. She was playing for love, and that made her unstoppable. In his own cell across the city, Vincent was receiving a similar phone call from his lawyer, learning about Elena's decision to confront Marcus. For the first time since his arrest, Vincent smiled. His wife, his brilliant, brave, unstoppable wife, was about to prove that sometimes the only way to win an impossible game was to change the rules entirely. Tomorrow would bring either their complete destruction or their ultimate redemption. But they would face it together, exactly as they'd promised 15 years ago when they had nothing but each other and dreams of building something beautiful. Some promises were worth keeping, no matter the cost. Elena sat in the Federal Building's conference room at 8 a.m. sharp, her hands steady despite the wire taped to her chest and the knowledge that her entire future depended on the next 30 minutes. Through the one-way mirror, she could see Agent Chun and Santos monitoring the recording equipment that would either damn or save her. Marcus Sterling walked in exactly on time, looking every inch the successful CEO in his perfectly tailored suit and confident smile. He'd aged overnight, stress lines around his eyes that hadn't been there during yesterday's board meeting, but his arrogance remained intact. "Elena," Marcus said warmly, as if they were meeting for coffee instead of negotiating her husband's freedom. "You look remarkably composed for someone facing 20 years in federal prison." "I've learned a lot about what really matters in the last 24 hours, Elena replied, gesturing for him to sit across from her. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Marcus settled into his chair with the satisfied air of a man who believed he held all the cards. "I assume your lawyer explained my offer? Vincent's freedom in exchange for your public support of the new Sterling Dynamics leadership structure. I understand the offer. What I don't understand is why you destroyed your own brother." Elena kept her voice level, conversational. "Vincent trusted you with everything, his company, his secrets, his family. Why betray that?" Marcus's smile faltered slightly. "Elena, you have to understand, Vincent was never supposed to be the face of Sterling Dynamics. I was the one with the business degree, the connections, the vision for expansion. But Vincent had the charm, the media presence, the ability to make people believe in impossible things. Like the impossible thing of building a tech company from nothing? Like the impossible thing of deserving success without sacrifice." Marcus's voice carried years of buried resentment. "Do you know what it's like to watch your younger brother get credit for your work? To see him on magazine covers while you handle the actual business? To watch him marry a beautiful woman while you spend 18-hour days making his dreams come true?" Elena felt a chill of recognition. Marcus's words echoed her own feelings about being invisible in Vincent's shadow. But where she'd chosen affair and distance, Marcus had chosen systematic destruction. "So you decided to take everything away from him?" "I decided to take back what was rightfully mine." Marcus leaned forward, his mask of reasonableness beginning to slip. "Sterling Dynamics should have been my company from the beginning. Vincent was just the pretty face we put on it for investors and the media." Elena glanced toward the mirror, knowing Agent Chun was recording every word. "Marcus, the FBI says you embezzled $47 million. That's not taking back what's yours, that's theft." Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Elena, that money was always mine. I've been doing Vincent's job for years while he played CEO and husband. Every major contract, every strategic decision, every innovation that made Sterling Dynamics profitable, that was my work. Vincent was too busy with his marriage problems to notice that I was running his company. But the offshore accounts, the fake transactions, were necessary to protect the company from Vincent's instability." Marcus's voice grew colder. "Did you know he was planning to give you 50% ownership of Sterling Dynamics? As a grand romantic gesture to save your marriage? He was going to turn a billion-dollar corporation into a divorce settlement." Elena's breath caught. Vincent had never mentioned that plan, but she could picture him making exactly that kind of sweeping gesture. The same impulse that had led him to leak their photos, to risk everything for love. "So you framed him to stop him from giving me half the company?" I saved the company from being destroyed by his emotional decisions, Marcus corrected. Vincent was a brilliant innovator, but he never understood that business isn't about feelings. It's about results, profits, strategic thinking. He was going to ruin everything we'd built for love. The irony was devastating. Marcus had destroyed Vincent's life to prevent him from choosing love over business. The same choice Elena and Vincent were making now, the choice that was finally setting them free. Marcus, there's something I need to know, Elena said carefully. David Morrison, was he part of your plan, or just a convenient tool? Marcus's smile returned, sharp as a blade. David Morrison is a romantic fool who fell in love with another man's wife. I simply provided him with information and suggestions about how to win you away from Vincent. He never knew he was helping me document Vincent's emotional instability. You used my affair to justify your frame job. I used your affair to demonstrate that Vincent Sterling's judgment was compromised by personal drama. The affair gave context to the embezzlement, a desperate man trying to win back his wife with money he didn't have. Marcus checked his watch. Elena, we can continue this fascinating psychological analysis, or we can discuss the terms of Vincent's freedom. Elena felt the weight of the wire against her skin, the knowledge that every word was being recorded for the jury that would decide their fate. Marcus had just confessed to orchestrating Vincent's frame job, to manipulating David Morrison, to embezzling millions of dollars. But she needed one more piece of the puzzle. What about Rebecca Martinez? Vincent's assistant who found evidence of your computer access? Marcus's expression darkened. Rebecca Martinez is a convicted felon who illegally accessed private computer systems. Her so-called evidence is inadmissible, and she'll be facing federal charges of her own by the end of the week. But the evidence itself, the proof that you used Vincent's credentials to authorize the fake transactions, proves nothing except that Vincent was careless with his passwords. Marcus stood up, his patience finally exhausted. Elena, I'm offering you and Vincent a chance to walk away from this with minimal damage. You testify that Vincent was suffering from emotional breakdown due to your affair, that his judgment was compromised, that he made poor financial decisions, but wasn't criminally malicious. In exchange, I ensure the evidence against you disappears, and Vincent serves 2 years maximum security instead of 20. Elena stared at him, understanding the full scope of his manipulation. Even now, even after confessing to everything, Marcus was trying to rewrite history to make himself the victim of Vincent's emotional instability. And if I refuse, then you both go to trial with fabricated evidence that I've had 2 years to perfect. Elena, I know every detail of Sterling Dynamics financial systems, every password, every security protocol. I can create digital evidence that will convince any jury of your guilt. Marcus's voice was calm, professional. The choice is simple: accept my version of events, or spend the next 20 years in prison. Elena felt something click into place. Not just the realization that Marcus had confessed to everything they needed, but the understanding that he'd revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of love itself. Marcus, Elena said quietly, you're right about one thing. Vincent would have given me half the company to save our... But it wasn't Marcus's arrest that made Elena's heart soar. It was the sight of Vincent walking through the conference room door, flanked by his lawyer, and looking at her with an expression of pure awe. Elena, Vincent breathed, crossing the room in 3 strides to pull her into his arms. You magnificent, brilliant, crazy woman. You did it. We did it, Elena corrected, holding him so tightly she could feel his heartbeat against her chest. We chose each other and we won. Agent Chen cleared her throat. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, all charges against you are being dropped. The evidence Mr. Marcus Sterling just provided, combined with Rebecca Martinez's computer records, gives us everything we need for prosecution. You're free to go. Elena looked at Vincent, seeing her own disbelief reflected in his green eyes. After 24 hours of federal prison, betrayal, and the destruction of everything they'd built, they were suddenly free, not just legally, but emotionally. Vincent, Elena said quietly, Marcus was right about one thing. You were going to give me half of Sterling Dynamics. Vincent's smile was the same one that had made her fall in love with him 15 years ago. I was going to give you everything, Elena. The company, the money, the house, all of it. Because I finally realized that having you was worth more than having anything else. And if Marcus hadn't framed you, if you'd actually given me half the company, then we would have run it together, made decisions together, built something beautiful together. Vincent cupped her face in his hands. Elena, I spent 15 years trying to prove I deserved you. It took losing everything to realize I already had you. I just forgot how to see you. Elena kissed him then, soft and desperate and full of 15 years of love that had survived wealth and poverty, success and scandal, betrayal and redemption. When they broke apart, Agent Chen was smiling despite her professional demeanor. "Mrs. Sterling," Agent Chen said, "for what it's worth, that was some of the bravest work I've seen from a civilian. You could have taken the plea deal and avoided all risk." "Agent Chen," Elena replied, "6 months ago, I would have taken that deal without hesitation. But my husband taught me something about taking risks for love." Vincent's phone buzzed with a call from Rebecca Martinez. He answered on speaker, and Rebecca's voice filled the room with barely contained excitement. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, are you watching the news?" Elena and Vincent exchanged glances. In the chaos of Marcus's arrest, they hadn't thought about the media circus that was undoubtedly erupting outside. "What's happening, Rebecca?" "Sterling Dynamics stock is up 30% since Marcus's arrest was announced. The board is calling an emergency meeting to reinstate Vincent as CEO. And Vincent, you're not going to believe this. David Morrison just held a press conference admitting that he was manipulated by Marcus into believing your marriage was fake. He's publicly apologizing and offering to testify on your behalf in any civil suits." Elena felt Vincent's arms tighten around her. Their story was being rewritten in real time. Not as the cautionary tale of wealth and betrayal Marcus had intended, but as a love story about choosing each other over everything else. "Rebecca," Vincent said quietly, "call the board and tell them I'll be there for the meeting. But Elena and I need some time first. Time to figure out who we want to be now that we're free." After they ended the call, Elena and Vincent stood in the federal building's conference room, holding each other and marveling at the fact that they'd survived the worst 24 hours of their lives by doing the one thing they'd forgotten how to do: trust each other completely. "Vincent," Elena said softly, "when you get Sterling Dynamics back, what are you going to do with it?" Vincent's answer came without hesitation. "Build something worthy of the woman I love. Elena, I don't want to be the CEO who works 18-hour days anymore. I want to be the man who comes home for dinner, who asks about your art, who dances with you in our kitchen while dinner burns on the stove." Elena smiled through tears she didn't remember starting to cry. "And I want to be the woman who supports your dreams without losing herself in them, who creates art that means something instead of just looking expensive." They were interrupted by Agent Chen, who was holding Elena's purse and Vincent's wallet, personal effects that had been confiscated during their arrest. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling," Agent Chen said, "there's one more thing. The civil asset forfeiture on your home and accounts is being reversed. Everything Marcus froze will be returned to you within 72 hours. Elena stared at Agent Chen, then at Vincent. In the space of 2 hours, they'd gone from facing 20 years in prison to having their entire life restored. But the strangest part was that Elena didn't feel the relief she'd expected. She felt something else entirely: gratitude for having lost everything, because losing everything had shown them what truly mattered. "Agent Chen," Elena said quietly, "thank you. But Vincent and I need to decide whether we want that life back." Vincent squeezed her hand, understanding perfectly. They could return to their mansion, their expensive cars, their charity galas and magazine covers. Or they could choose something else, something simpler and more real. "Elena," Vincent said, "what if we kept the company but changed everything else? What if we sold the house and bought something where we could actually be happy? What if we used our second chance to build the life we should have had all along?" Elena looked at her husband, the man who'd been willing to go to prison rather than abandon her, who'd chosen love over safety at every crucial moment, and realized that Marcus had been wrong about everything. Love wasn't weakness. Love was the strongest force in the universe, strong enough to survive betrayal and scandal and federal prison. Strong enough to turn a bitter ending into a beautiful beginning. "Vincent Sterling," Elena said, "let's go home and figure out what that means now." Hand in hand, they walked out of the federal building and into the media circus that awaited them. But this time, they faced the cameras together, ready to tell their story the way it was meant to be told. Not as a cautionary tale about wealth and power, but as a love story about two people who'd lost everything and found each other. It was the beginning of their real life together. 6 months later, Elena woke to the sound of Vincent humming in the kitchen and the smell of coffee that was probably burning. Through the windows of their new home, a cozy craftsman cottage in Sausalito with a view of the bay instead of photographers, She could see him attempting to make breakfast while simultaneously reviewing architectural plans spread across their small dining table. The contrast to their old life was startling. No marble countertops or staff to handle domestic tasks, no 15-room mansion that echoed with loneliness. Just Vincent Sterling, former Millionaire CEO, burning toast in a kitchen barely big enough for two people and looking happier than she'd seen him in years. The contractor says we can break ground on the artist's studio next month. Vincent called out as Elena appeared in the doorway, wearing one of his old Sterling Dynamics t-shirts as a nightgown. But only if you're sure you want it attached to the house. We could still do a separate building in the back garden. Elena moved to stand behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist as she studied the plans for her new art studio. After months of legal proceedings and media attention, she was finally ready to paint again. Not the expensive pieces that had decorated their old life, but work that meant something. I want it attached, Elena said, pressing a kiss to the back of his neck. I spent too many years hiding away in separate spaces. I want to be able to hear you laughing while I work. Vincent turned in her arms, his green eyes bright with the contentment that had slowly replaced the driven intensity of his corporate days. Mrs. Sterling, are you sure you want to be married to a man whose biggest professional challenge this week is debugging code for a nonprofit's donation platform? Elena smiled, thinking about the path that had brought them here. After Marcus's conviction and 3-year federal prison sentence, Vincent had been reinstated as CEO of Sterling Dynamics. But instead of returning to his old patterns, he'd surprised everyone, including himself, by restructuring the entire company around work-life balance and employee wellness. He'd reduced his own salary by 60%, implemented mandatory vacation policies, and started leaving the office at 5 p.m. every day to have dinner with his wife. The changes had been so radical that several board members had resigned, predicting disaster. Instead, Sterling Dynamics had become the most innovative and profitable company in its sector, with a waiting list of talented professionals who wanted to work for an organization that valued human connection over quarterly profits. Vincent, Elena said, tracing patterns on his chest, I fell in love with you when you were nobody's idea of a millionaire. Having you as a reformed millionaire who codes for animal shelters in his spare time? That's just a bonus. Their morning was interrupted by the doorbell, Elena's parents arriving for their weekly breakfast tradition. Margaret and Robert Morrison had driven down from Sacramento every Sunday since Elena and Vincent's legal troubles began, offering the kind of steady family support that money couldn't buy. Elena, dear, her mother called out as she entered through the unlocked front door, carrying her signature coffee cake. How are my favorite survivors this morning? Elena's father followed, embracing Vincent with the genuine affection that had developed over months of family meals and honest conversations. Vincent, I saw the article in the Chronicle about Sterling Dynamics' new veteran hiring program. Your mother would be proud. Vincent's expression softened. His parents had died in a car accident 3 years earlier, one of the losses that had driven him deeper into work as a coping mechanism. But Elena's family had quietly adopted him, giving him the emotional support system he'd never learned to build for himself. As they settled around the small dining table that had replaced their formal dining room, Elena marveled at how naturally this new life had developed. Instead of charity galas and business dinners, their social calendar consisted of game nights with friends, hiking trips with Elena's sister Maria, and quiet evenings reading books they'd never had time to enjoy. Elena, her father said, cutting into his coffee cake, Maria mentioned you've been talking to galleries about a new exhibition? Elena glanced at Vincent, who encouraged her with a smile. Actually, I'm organizing it myself. A group show featuring artists who've experienced major life transitions. Divorce, job loss, recovery, starting over. We're calling it Phoenix, Art from the Ashes. That's wonderful, dear. Where will you hold it? David Morrison offered his gallery space, Elena said quietly. The table went silent. David Morrison remained a complicated figure in their story. The man whose affair with Elena had been manipulated by Marcus, who'd been genuinely devastated to learn he'd been used as a weapon against the Sterling's marriage. Vincent reached for Elena's hand. David called last week. He wanted to make amends in a way that actually helps instead of just making him feel better about himself. Offering the gallery space for Elena's exhibition was his idea. And you're comfortable with that? Elena's mother asked Vincent gently. I'm comfortable with Elena making choices based on what she wants to create, not what she wants to avoid, Vincent replied. David was never our real enemy, Marcus was. And Elena's art deserves to be seen, regardless of the venue's history. Elena squeezed Vincent's hand, grateful for the growth they'd both experienced. 6 months ago, Vincent would have seen David's offer as a threat. Now he saw it as what it actually was. A chance for Elena to reclaim her artistic voice in a space where she'd once felt valued. After her parents left, Elena and Vincent drove to their old neighborhood for the monthly lunch they shared with Rebecca Martinez. Rebecca had become more than Vincent's former assistant. She'd become family, the person who'd risked everything to save them when they couldn't save themselves. They met at a small cafe near Rebecca's new apartment, a cheerful space she could afford thanks to the reward money the FBI had given her for exposing Marcus's crimes. Her daughter Sophia was with them, a bright 8-year-old who'd become the unofficial niece Elena and Vincent had never expected to have. "Mr. Vincent, Mrs. Elena," Sophia announced as they sat down, "Mom says you're going to help me with my science fair project about renewable energy." Vincent grinned, pulling out a tablet to show Sophia the solar panel designs he'd been working on. One of the unexpected joys of his reduced work schedule was having time to mentor young people, to share his expertise in ways that built rather than just profited. "Rebecca," Elena said as Vincent and Sophia dove into discussions of photovoltaic cells, "how are things at the new job?" Rebecca had left Sterling Dynamics after Vincent's reinstatement, not because of any conflict, but because she discovered a passion for digital forensics during her investigation of Marcus's crimes. The FBI had offered her a consulting position that allowed her to help other families recover from financial fraud. "It's challenging work," Rebecca said, watching her daughter laugh at something Vincent had said, "but meaningful. Last week, I helped an elderly couple recover retirement savings that had been stolen by their financial advisor. It reminded me why fighting for truth matters." Elena studied Rebecca's face, seeing the confidence that had developed over months of using her skills to help people rather than just manage schedules. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something. Do you ever regret getting involved in our mess? You could have kept your head down, avoided federal attention, stayed safe." Rebecca's answer came without hesitation. "Mrs. Elena, 6 months ago I was a single mother with a criminal record, working for a boss who barely knew my name. Today I have meaningful work, my daughter has college savings, and I'm part of a family that chose me. Some risks are worth taking." As they drove home that afternoon, Elena reflected on the theme that had emerged from their conversation. The idea that love multiplied when it was shared, that their fight to save their marriage had somehow created space for other people to transform their lives too. "Vincent," Elena said as they pulled into their driveway, "do you ever miss the old life? The money, the status, the sense that we were important?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. "I miss feeling like I was building something that mattered. But Elena, I was building something that mattered. I just didn't realize it was us, not the company. I don't miss the lifestyle. I miss the version of myself who thought I deserved love because of what I achieved rather than who I chose to be." That evening, as they sat on their small back deck watching the sunset over the bay, Elena's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost deleted it without reading, but something made her open the message. "Elena, this is Marcus. I know you have no reason to read this, but I wanted you to know that watching you and Vincent fight for each other taught me something about love I never understood. I spent so many years resenting Vincent for having what I thought I deserved, but I never learned how to build anything real with another person. You both paid a terrible price for my jealousy, and I'm sorry. I hope you find the happiness I was too broken to recognize when I saw it. M." Elena showed the message to Vincent, who read it twice before responding. "How does that make you feel?" Vincent asked. "Sad for him, mostly. Marcus destroyed his life because he thought love was something you earned through achievement rather than something you built through choice." Elena deleted the message, not out of anger but out of completion. "But Vincent, I think forgiveness is something we build too, over time. Maybe someday I'll be able to forgive him completely. Today, I'm just grateful we survived him." Vincent pulled Elena closer on the small outdoor couch they'd bought to replace the expensive patio furniture from their old life. "Elena, can I tell you something? Always. 6 months ago, I thought happiness was what you felt when everything was going perfectly. But sitting here with you, in our small house with our simple life, dealing with real problems and real joys, this is the first time I've understood that happiness isn't about circumstances. It's about choosing each other every day, even when the days are ordinary." Elena turned to face him fully, seeing the man she'd married 15 years ago reflected in the man he'd become through loss and choice and love that had been tested by fire. "Vincent Sterling," she said softly, "if you asked me to marry you today, knowing everything we've been through, knowing what choosing each other actually costs, I would say yes before you finished the question." Vincent kissed her then, soft and sure and full of 15 years of love that had been broken down and rebuilt into something stronger than either of them had thought possible. When they broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing simultaneously. "Elena," Vincent said, "I love you more now, poor and simple and real, than I ever did when we were rich and complicated and performing for the world." "I love you too," Elena replied. "And Vincent, tomorrow I'm going to paint again. For the first time since before Marcus, before the affair, before we lost ourselves in success. I'm going to paint because I want to create something beautiful, not because I need to prove anything to anyone." "What are you going to paint?" Elena looked around their small deck, at the garden they were learning to tend together, at the life they'd built from the ashes of everything they'd lost. "I think I'm going to paint us. Not the version of us that looked perfect in magazines, but the version that chose love over safety, truth over image, each other over everything else." As the stars came out over the bay, Elena and Vincent Sterling sat together in comfortable silence, two people who'd learned that the best love stories weren't about finding your soulmate. They were about choosing to become the kind of people worthy of real love, and then choosing each other again and again, especially when that choice required everything you had. Their love story had started with terrible tacos and borrowed jackets, had survived wealth and poverty, betrayal and redemption, federal prison and family dinners. It would continue tomorrow with burned coffee and architectural plans, with art that meant something and work that honored both profit and humanity. Some love stories ended with happily ever after. But the best love stories, the real ones, ended with happily ever choosing, because that's what love actually was. Not a feeling that happened to you, but a decision you made every day to build something beautiful with another imperfect person. Elena Sterling fell asleep that night in Vincent Sterling's arms, in their small house that held more joy than their mansion ever had, planning the art she would create and the life they would continue building together. They'd lost everything and found each other. It was the best trade they'd ever made. What did this story teach you about the difference between love that protects and love that empowers? Elena and Vincent learned that real love isn't about shielding each other from hard truths. It's about facing those truths together and choosing each other, even when that choice costs everything else. Have you ever had to choose between safety and authenticity in your own relationships? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see love, loss, and the courage it takes to rebuild your life from the ground up.